What is up, Pats Nation? It's Patriots Global back here with another video, and in this one, we are going to be talking about 5 different things that I feel the Patriots must do this offseason. Now, like always, these are in no specific order from least to greatest. There are just 5 things that I feel the Patriots must work on for this offseason in order to have a successful season for next year. If there's anything that you guys feel that I didn't mention, please make sure you guys let me know in the comments below. Like always, I'm very curious what you guys have to say. There's definitely more things that the Patriots need to do than just the 5 things that I'm naming. But if we're going to talk about the most important 5 things, to me, this is what they are. So the first thing that the Patriots have to do is reestablish these pass catchers. And originally on my list, I had wide receivers and tight ends as 2 separate things, but really, they just have to be put together because the Patriots have to work on each individual position, ultimately leading up to the pass catchers. Every aspect offensively, except for maybe the running backs, and even then they had some issues with drops, all contributed at the end of the season for a extremely underwhelming and extremely underperforming set of pass catchers. I mean, the Patriots wide receivers ranked last in the entire NFL in separation. An injured Julian Edelman, who should have been out for the entire season because of the injuries that he sustained throughout the season, was New England's best receiver. Of course, he eclipsed over 1,000 yards yet again. You look at their other wide receivers, and they could only eclipse a couple of hundred yards, a few hundred yards. No one was able to get to that really 700 mark or anything substantial to be like, okay, you were a big contributor this year. Which, of course, is just crazy to think about because when you look at the beginning of the season, the Patriots had the best wide receiver group in the entire NFL. And you can quote me on that. Okay, Demaryius Thomas, Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman, Josh Gordon. These were the wide receivers that Tom Brady had to work with. Of course, at that time, Philip Dorsett was also going off. A few weeks later, you don't have Demaryius Thomas, you don't have Josh Gordon, you don't have Antonio Brown. And really, by the end of the season, they became a shell of their potential that they had in the beginning of the season. Then you look at the tight ends, and the Patriots ranked last in productions from tight ends throughout the entire NFL, and of course, that very vividly showed also. A problem with the Patriots all season was being way too predictable. Defenses knew that Tom Brady did not have a tight end to go to, so they really didn't have to worry about a big tight end that they had to in the past with Rob Gronkowski. So what did they do? They looked to these wide receivers. And when you look at the wide receivers that the Patriots had, no one stood out too much. The best guy and the biggest guy there was Julian Edelman, and he was injured. All you got to do is double team the guy. When you look at the history of the Patriots and you look at the dynasty with Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, over the past couple of decades, they've been known for the offense. Tom Brady has been the icon. The offense has been the icon to the team. And they've always had top 10, top 5 offense, especially in the passing game. It was definitely an uncharacteristic-like season for the Patriots. I mean, Brady was super upset, had the worst season that he's arguably had in his entire career. And of course, the lack of pass catchers, the lack of a passing game was a big contributor to why the Patriots didn't really get anywhere this season, why they played in the wild card for the first time in 10 years? Because their offense could not keep up with anything. I mean, you could argue that this is the most important thing on everything that I'm going to cover in this video, and I wouldn't tell you you're wrong. Now, how I think that the Patriots will go about this, how I think that the Patriots should go about this, is going to be covered in a new video, but definitely one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is addressing these pass catchers, both a wide receiver and tight end. Next up is going to be that they need to re-sign these key players. The Patriots are heading into this offseason with about 19 free agents. Now, I made an entire video covering all of the Patriots free agents, the restricted free agents, the unrestricted free agents, just everyone that is not under contract and will hit the open market in March. So if you want the entire list of all these guys, along with my opinion on who they should sign and who they shouldn't sign, make sure you guys go check out that video for a more in-depth analysis. But this is definitely one of the more important aspects to the Patriots offseason, and I don't think that a lot of people are necessarily sure why. And I think the best way that I'm able to put it is in this scenario with Tom Brady in the offense. If Tom Brady constantly has new wide receivers coming in, whether that's yearly, monthly, I mean, let's look at the facts. In the past couple of years, the amount of receivers that the Patriots have had come in throughout the offseason and throughout the regular season, both last year and the year prior. A guy would get signed during the free agency period. He would get released before OTAs. A guy would get signed during OTAs, be released before minicamp. They'd sign another guy for minicamp. He'd be released by training camp. And it was just a continuous cycle. And because of that, Brady was not able to really ever get on the same page. The guys were never able to really fully emulsify themselves into the Patriots, system in general, and get used to being comfortable and playing within the Patriots system, which is the hardest, arguably, in the entire NFL. A lot of people, when they look at the NFL, they look at based off of how players have played and how well their talent is. And that's definitely far from true. Just because a player plays very well, with one team versus another team, or even, for example, college versus the NFL, that doesn't mean that they're going to have that same talent, that they're going to play that exact same no matter where they go. Let's look at the draft. A lot of first-round picks, guys who were extremely talented and extremely highly looked upon in their college days, headed into the NFL as a first-round draft pick, and they end up being busts. I mean, even as Patriots fans, we constantly see that guys will come into our organization that we expect to do really great, do some really great things, and we get super upset because it just doesn't work out. They're not that player that we were expecting because of their previous play from their past. Or even vice versa. When guys will come in, the classic Bill Belichick Walmart guy signing, and they'll come in and they'll make an impact that no one ever expected. Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola, Tom Brady, Julian Edelman. I mean, when Darrelle Revis was with the Patriots, he was a baller. Okay, and then gets shipped off to the Jets, and it's like, what the heck happened to that guy? And it's that same thing here with the Patriots. I mean, there's even a guy that is a free agent for the Patriots in March that we could talk about. That's Jamie Collins. When Collins was with the Patriots, he was all pro. He was one of the best linebackers, one of the best pass rushing linebackers in the entire league. Goes to the Cleveland Browns thinking he's all that, and he doesn't work out for their system at all. Comes back to the Patriots the following season, and we start to see that old Jamie Collins that was previously with the Patriots a couple years ago before his ego took over. When you find guys that work really well in your system, despite their level of talent, those are guys that you need to re-sign. And I mean, again, even vice versa for the players. Guys like Jamie Collins who have seen what it's like to be on the other side of things, what it's like to play really well in the organization for the Patriots, and then move on thinking that, you're that talented player, that you did all that work, that it wasn't the organization, it wasn't the system you were playing in, it was all you. And sadly, figuring that out the hard way. So that definitely has to be one of the Patriots' big moves here, is signing those key players. Of course, Bill Belichick has his own mind of what the key players are versus my key players, but really analyzing which guys do you know for a fact that you can replace to have the same quality, if not better, and what guys you would be pushing and struggling to replace. Because you don't want to just let a guy walk in hopes that you'll be able to replace him and then let it bite you in the butt down the road. Now, the third thing that the Patriots must do this offseason is really look into the Patriots' offensive line, both the players are the starters and the players that are the depth. And this is another very under the radar one that I think that a lot of Patriots fans or just fans in general that are analyzing the Patriots offseason might forget about. But to me, the offensive line is like the engine of the offense. You have a bad offensive line, then your quarterback's not going to be able to really do anything. He's not going to be able to stand upright. Your plays aren't going to work out the way that you were hoping. Your guys aren't going to have enough time to get open. So where does your pass game go? Well, nowhere, because your quarterback doesn't have time to throw and your receivers don't have the time to get open. You also can't look to the run game because if your guys up front are not able to stand a block and open holes for your running back to actually cut through, then your running game is going to go nowhere. You're going to get stopped in your tracks, and more likely than not, you're actually going to get stopped behind your tracks for a loss of yardage, which ultimately sums up the fact that without a good offensive line, without the engine of your car, what the heck is your offense going to do? And last year was a pretty up and down season for the Patriots offensive line, especially compared to the year prior where the Patriots had a top 3 offensive line. The Patriots also had a lot of transactions made to their offensive line compared to 2 years prior, or I should say a year prior. You know, they lost their center, David Andrews, and that's a big one in itself. That's a guy that's going to snap the ball. That's the guy that is really your leader of the offensive line. That's also a captain to the Patriots offensive line. Now, Ted Karras did not do a bad job. Not at all. But he definitely did not perform as well as David Andrews did, and that definitely hurt the Patriots within itself. You also had Shaq Mason, who definitely regressed compared to past seasons. He's one of the best guards in the league. The Patriots are paying him as one of the best guards in the league, and last year he really struggled. Now, was part of that on him? Was part of that the fact that David Andrews was gone and he had to hold some of that weight of Ted Karras? I would say it was a little bit of both. But nonetheless, he had a pretty rough season on himself. Marcus Cannon also had a up and down season. He had a lot of great moments, but he also had a lot of bad moments, especially earlier in the season when he got injured. He had some, weeks and some plays where he had to go out because he was dealing with injury, and sadly, that's the bad thing about Marcus Cannon is that the guy seems to always be getting injured and dealing with some health problems. As for the left guard, Joe Thuney definitely did his job. He was exactly what the Patriots needed. I feel that he was actually the bolster to the Patriots offensive line. I think without him, things would have gotten a lot, and I mean a lot more tough, especially on that left side of the Patriots offensive line, which already was dealing with some heat because of Marshall Newhouse, okay? Of course, Marshall Newhouse was replacing Isaiah Wynn. Isaiah Wynn played the first week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers and then left the second half of the game the second week versus the Miami Dolphins. Newhouse was really just a revolving door. He was super slow, super sluggish, and because of that, the Patriots had a lot of struggles offensively. Wynn came back, and it was definitely an upgrade, but I'll be talking about how Wynn did, a full analysis in its own video, looking back on how Isaiah Wynn did in his first actual season as the Patriots left tackle. I think there's definitely some question marks with the Patriots offensive line heading into the offseason, and I fully expect Bill Belichick to do some shopping for the offensive line. I think that he'll look towards the draft to add some players, whether he looks to add a center if they can't re-sign Ted Karras for depth, whether that's adding a left tackle, a right tackle, a guard. I fully expect him to look towards free agency and the draft to add to the offensive line. You have David Andrews coming back from missing an entire season with blood clots. That's a pretty big deal. You have to make sure that he's 100% to go. You have to make sure that he's going to be okay to go for the start of the season. Not to mention the fact that the Patriots will be losing one of their best offensive line pieces in Joe Thuney, more than likely. It's going to be super hard for the Patriots to retain him, especially with the money they're already giving Shaq Mason. They already are saying that Joe Thuney is likely to reset the market for offensive linemen, especially more specifically guards. So in hindsight, it's probably unlikely that the Patriots will be able to retain him. We've seen what it's like for the Patriots to have a bad offensive line. We've seen what it was like last season. In 2015, we really saw what it was like, and we can see the type of deficit that it will have on an offense. So it's super, super vital that the Patriots are making sure who their starters are going to be going forward, but more specifically, adding good depth so that they don't have to look towards a guy like Marshall Newhouse at the last minute. Next up is going to fall more so on Josh McDaniels. He didn't get the head coaching job of any of the teams that were interested in him, so it sounds like he's going to be the Patriots offensive coordinator at least for another year. So working better on offensive play calling, especially after what we've seen this past season, is going to be crucial. I think a lot of us can agree that Josh McDaniels had a very questionable season, especially with the play calls he was having. I mean, randomly calling screenplays at just inappropriate times, or even having 3 back-to-back run plays the same way when each time they didn't work. That was very questionable. I mean, we can go on and on and on talking about all the plays that Josh McDaniels called that kind of had us sitting in our seats like, what the heck was that? And look, I truly and firmly believe that the Patriots had something different planned at the start of the season. Preseason, training camp. That everything kind of just dismantled as the regular season started, as the offseason kind of progressed through everything that happened, losing offensive pieces that I don't think that they were expecting to do. Having a lot of struggles with their pass catchers, having struggles within their offensive line, getting the run game going. I think that they were very limited, but even in the sense of them being limited, Josh McDaniels still had some pretty bad games in play calling, especially with being predictable. I mean, that is something that I talked about really the entire season with the Patriots, especially mid to late season, was just how predictable the Patriots offense was getting. I could watch the game, and right when they were getting into formation offensively, I could go, okay, this is going to be a run play. This is going to be a pass play. Oh, look, they're about to run a screen. And it would the exact thing that I said, watch, this is going to happen, ended up happening. And if I could do that, I can only imagine what top-tier defensive players, these captains, are able to do. So really what I think the Patriots have to do is they have to become less predictable. Of course, it's going to be easier said than done, but Josh McDaniels is a mastermind, okay? I know a lot of people hate him. A lot of people have given him hate. A lot of people wanted him out. And I don't understand where all the hate is coming from to Josh McDaniels because he's an offensive mastermind. And with him and Tom Brady, as long as Brady comes back, and Bill Belichick, I firmly believe that they will find a way to become a whole lot less predictable for next season. And really, the first way to start becoming less predictable is building good starting pieces and building good depth pieces. Making sure that the things you are working on the entire offseason, OTAs, minicamp, training camp, all the things you're working on here and you're trying are getting implemented into next season. And the fifth and final thing that the Patriots must do this offseason is work on player development. And when I talk about player development, I'm leaning more towards these rookies. The Patriots 2019 draft was a hell of a draft. To me, it was one of the best drafts that the Patriots ever had, okay? You had guys like N'Keal Harry. You had guys like Chase Winovich, who stole. You have guys like Damian Harris, who a lot of people considered the steal of the entire draft. Even Juwan Williams, whose height and his talent that we've seen in college, if it can translate to the NFL, the Patriots have a very special piece in him. The Patriots had something really, really special within this past draft class, and I'm also going to be making a video just recapping how the Patriots 2019 draft class did a year later. But just so much talent there that I wished and I was hoping that Bill Belichick would use into this past season. Sadly, he didn't really do it much. And that's the thing with Bill Belichick, okay? We all know that he doesn't really use his rookies all that much within the first season. I mean, hey, look at Damian Harris. Damian Harris didn't get really any playing time. He got a whole redshirted year. Same thing happened, a few years ago to James White before he became the star he is with the Patriots. But N'Keal Harry, for the first player I'm going to talk about, he's something special. He's something very special, and a lot of people are sleeping on him because of what they've seen this past year. Remember that the guy had his offseason consisting towards the end of being injured. He didn't get really any preseason time, except for a couple of snaps before getting injured again. He missed half the season because of being on injured reserve. And then he came back, and the Patriots used him in a way that he really has never been, okay? The great thing about N'Keal Harry is the jump balls, is the 50-50 balls, and we've seen that a few times already with him. In the preseason, in practice, a couple of times even in the games. And yet, I really never saw the Patriots doing that with him. Now, towards the end, running the sweeps with him is something that we've seen in the past and something that I predicted they were going to do with him that they finally did as of late, and it worked out really well for them. So, kudos to them for doing that. They did good there for player development. But expecting him to have good cuts, good separation, running great routes, having running slant routes and just all these other complicated routes that aren't N'Keal Harry, that's the reason that a lot of us were disappointed with him, because the Patriots are trying to use him in a way that right now N'Keal Harry isn't. Harry was regarded as one of the best wide receivers coming out of this draft for a reason. Look back at what he did in college that was so amazing. The jump balls, the yards after catch, his strength, and use that. Use him as an advantage. He has height. Use it. But we knew the second we drafted him that he was not going to be like these other Patriots wide receivers. He wasn't going to be a Danny Amendola, a Julian Edelman. If anything, he was going to be more of a Rob Gronkowski type of player. And I get that the Patriots are going to ask him to do things that he hasn't done before, and they're going to expect him to do some things that aren't necessarily his play style, that are more the Patriots' play style. But right now, he's not there. He's not close to there. Use him the way that he's proven to be extremely effective. Even Chase Winovich, okay? Chase Winovich proved to be extremely effective on the low amount of opportunities that I feel he was getting. He got a lot of opportunities on special teams, which, of course, Bill Belichick. But I mean, even guys like Dietrich Wise were getting more play time than he was. Winovich finished this season with 5.5 sacks. Now, the Patriots' rookie all-time leading sacker was Chandler Jones back in 2012, where he had 6 sacks. Winovich was half a sack away from tying Chandler Jones, who's one of the best defensive end and pass rushers within the entire NFL, who the Patriots have been missing ever since they traded him to the Arizona Cardinals in, 2015, 2016? A lot of people started talking about the Patriots' defensive line towards the end of the season, how it looked like it was having some issues. And even in the offseason, a big position that a lot of people are looking for the Patriots to address, especially in the draft, is apparently defensive end. And I think a really great way for the Patriots to address this is using Chase Winovich a lot more. I get he's a rookie. I get he's new. But in the little bit you're using him, he's proven to be extremely effective on every single snap. And the great thing about Winovich is that he has such a high motor. You don't have to take him on the field. He can play snap after snap after snap after snap. So to me, he is a key piece to the Patriots defense next year, and I really hope that Bill Belichick will use him as that number 2 defensive end. But that's going to be it for this video. Those are 5 things that I think the Patriots must do this offseason. This video was way longer than I originally planned, but We went into depth. We talked about the 5 most important things, and we really analyzed the heck out of this. So what are you guys' thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. And if there's anything that you think that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments below, and like this video and subscribe if you have not already. But like always, thank you guys so much for watching and joining me in this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.